and what we stand up for and what we stay silent about, what we monetize versus what we actually live, matters. I have so much to say about the last 2 years of my life, but tonight is not the forum. What I will speak to separately is the feeling of being a woman who has a voice today. It's not for us to have shame, it's for them.
Hi besties, welcome back to my channel. Blake Lively and the Wayfair parties have now been ordered into a settlement conference. This is not something that they get out of it. Is now an order in the court and non-compliance in the process, and non-compliance in working through, and to a settlement would be deemed contempt of court as of today right now. They are required through their attorneys to show up on the 15th for a video conference with the magistrate judge named Sarah Cave to determine the time, the date, the availability, and the type of settlement conference they are going to have, whether it is going to be in person, if it is going to be by telephone or by video conference. And then that meeting is on December 15th. So their attorneys on December 15th are going to be meeting with Sarah Cave, and they're going to talk about what their availability is for the conference, what kind of conference they want to have. And then once they get that all together, Sarah will put together some proposed dates and the parties will determine what works best for everyone. Okay, now that it is in order, it means that everyone must participate. If they do not participate, it is deemed contempt of court. So what are settlement conferences like, and what does it mean? There is a little bit of misinformation that is out here right now, and one is that settlements are required or mandatory in New York or in all federal cases, and that is not true in the Southern District of New York. There is no local rule that says every single case must go to settlement. Instead, it is a tool that can be used in high conflict cases, in civil cases where the two parties are on diametrically different sides, but are also so high conflict that it is putting a big burden on the court. And a big burden on the court is meaning you are going to the court constantly to settle your conflicts, and it is putting an excess tax burden, like taxing the system, because of all the requests and demands you are asking of the court to handle high conflict cases, drain the system. They cause all other things in the court system to get delayed. And so sometimes the best way to remove that drain on the court is to see if the parties can settle. Now, settlement is not what you think it is, okay? It is not someone goes into a settlement and says, you are going to pay me $15 million and then I will walk away. That is not how settlement works at all. Settlements are done by, in this case, a magistrate judge who is a neutral third party, and her job is to help both sides find common ground and a common resolution that is best for all parties. It might not be what all parties want. It might not be your top 5 things of what you want, but it is ultimately a compromise based upon what is before the magistrate. So I went through settlements a couple years ago. I am not going to say for what case, but participation in these systems, you can walk in the door and be like, I am not going to settle, but these magistrates and judges, they are very skilled at managing high conflict. They are very skilled at helping both sides see where the other is coming from. And they also are very good at helping to explain to both sides the weaknesses that their case may have if it goes to trial. So if you are going to bring this case to trial, this is where your case may fall apart. These judges are also very good at explaining and helping people understand what it actually means to be in a trial and what that kind of exposure can do to someone, especially a celebrity like the Blake Lively people. I mean, not even just for celebrities, but like once you go to trial, like all your secrets are fair game, right? Everything is on the table, no more hiding behind a seal. And in this case, they have been hiding behind a seal, at least on Blake's side. And I think in this situation, there is a unique space for this judge to help them understand that maybe they do not have the case that they think they have, and that it might be best not only for Blake and Ryan, but also for Wayfair, that everyone finds a solution, a peaceful one. In my case, my experience is you do not have to be in the same room with the people, right? We did a video conference, and then we would be on the video conference all together, and then he did breakouts with us. Okay, so we would come together to talk about what was on the agenda for the day, and then you are with your legal team, they are with their legal team, and then the judge goes back and forth between the sides. That is how mine went, and so on my side. We discussed like, what are the things that you want? What are your concerns? Tell me your side of the story, right? And then they go to the other side. And then what the judge does is the judge comes from both perspectives very neutrally and explains like, this is what their concern is. This is what their issue is here is, your position here is what I think is something that could work to resolve that issue, right? They cannot force you to settle, right? And so they will start providing options of what might be feasible given the conflict and what the scope of the conflict entails. In this case, it may not settle. I do not know, but they cannot force anyone to do anything. They also cannot force Blake and Ryan to apologize, and they cannot force Justin to pay for something that he did not do. And so if both sides dig their heels in and they do not want to settle, they will not. But if they do, and they have an open mind and they are willing to work through it, they can find a resolution that would work for everyone. Truthfully, it is possible. I swear to God, it does not mean that it is what you want. It does not mean it is what I want. And it does not mean it is what is right. But it is what happens. Settlements will almost never include an apology ever, because apologies on a legal perspective admit liability. All right, so Blake and Ryan will never apologize for this if they go to settlement. They will also never apologize if they go to trial and lose, because apologies mean liability in the legal system. So if you were to apologize, if Blake and Ryan were to get up and say, I am so sorry, I totally lied, that literally opens them up to a lawsuit for malicious prosecution. They will never admit they lied. And so a magistrate will never make them admit they lied. But you might get a statement, that comes out of a settlement that is like, after some deep reflection, it has come to my attention that based upon the stress and the ige I was going through at the time of making this film, I may have misunderstood, misconstrued some situations that were not as bad as I thought they might have been. And after an incredible settlement process, I have come to realize that Belden and Wayfair really did have my best intentions at heart, or something like that, but they are never going to say they are sorry. Does that make sense? It can also mean they go to trial and they just dig their heels in and they do not move forward. That does not mean it is the end either. So a settlement can also and does not need to include money. So in the case of my settlement, no money changed hands on either side. No one paid for anyone attorney fees. Nothing. Everyone walked away and it was just over. And that can feel extremely unsatisfying. But in the world of the federal court system, and I can tell you this from my own experience, there's a rule of the American rule, and it is that everyone is required to pay their own attorney fees. Okay, you cannot force someone to pay for damages if the damages did not happen. And you cannot force, Wayfair to give up their rights to a film, because that is what you ask the magistrate to give you. I want the rights to. It starts with us. It will never happen. So sometimes leverage can be used on the side of Wayfair, where it is like, well, I will agree not to appeal the case. I will agree not to pursue you for malicious prosecution. I will agree not to X, Y, and Z if you walk away without taking a dime. Does that make sense? Okay. I hope that makes sense. Each side has leverage, right? And they have to use the leverage to the best of their ability. And I would venture to say that the person that is in the best position for a settlement favorable to them is Justin Baldoni and Wayfair, based upon what we are seeing come out with the evidence. So now it is a standing order. And why do I think that there is a good chance that he would win if they went to trial? That he would get a good settlement here? Well, some things have come out, right, with the evidence and with some of these admissions that have happened recently. Okay, when Blake filed her responses to the court related to the point where she admitted to certain things that happened, and she has a really big problem because she admits she lied, and it is part of the undisputed facts. Lively has since disclosed that her husband, Ryan Reynolds, actually wrote the revisions to the rooftop scene that she proposed. Undisputed. Why is that an issue? Because the 5 points before that were all about how Lively had been pressuring him to accept her revisions of the rooftop scene, how she had used her friends Taylor Swift and her husband Ryan Reynolds to push him to accept the revisions, how she sent text messages back and forth where she was telling him that she was writing this. She did not at any time disclose that Ryan was doing this. She was representing to him that it was her writing. It was her revisions, and she lied because it was really Ryan who did the writing. And that is the kind of lie that can unravel the whole case, because if she lied about writing and rewriting the script, what else did she lie? Once a plaintiff admits to lying on one thing, they become uncredible in the court. And if Blake were to go onto the witness stand because of her history of lying, the judge could tell the court and the jury, due to her own admissions of lying, there could be a jury instruction that they are not to take what she says as fact and to consider that she has lied and has admitted to lying in these sworn documents. And when you have a plaintiff that is admitted to lying, it is a big problem in the case, because when you start talking about all the pressure that is getting applied here, and she is telling them and representing to them that she is doing it. She is the one that is doing it. And then you find out a year later, after she's put you through hell, that it was really her lying to you and covering for what her husband was doing. It makes both of them lack credibility before the court. And it does not take a rocket scientist to look through these undisputed facts to realize there is a number of times that she admits to lying. And I think this will be an issue that comes up during the settlement for her. And if she were to go to trial, she would not be a good witness. She would be a terrible witness because they would be able to point back to each one of her lies. Another huge issue that she would have to overcome in a trial is proving that what Wayfair was doing during their quote-unquote smear campaign was not just responding to what she and Ryan were doing in the media, because another admission that they made, which until now they had been lying about, they admit to planting stories that were negative about Baldoni. They admit that they had Leslie Sloan plant a story calling Baldoni abusive and chauvinistic. They admit that the August article that was published on the Daily Mail that was like the disturbing truth of, what is going on between the feud of Baldoni and Lively, which included accusing him of not empowering women, being a chauvinistic man, not taking her point of view, not thinking or allowing Colleen to have a point of view, justifying having to rewrite the script, which highlights that this was an issue about creative control. At this point, they would have to explain to a jury why they should be given damages for their reputation being damaged when they were out in the media, damaging his reputation because it gives Wayfair a leg to stand on, saying that we were defending ourselves when we were responding. Not only did they admit to planting the stories with the Daily Mail, they have also admitted to misusing the legal system, with Van Zandt filing a baseless lawsuit suit in order to get the evidence in this case, and then handing that over to the New York Times when they did not notify anyone on the other side. And they have also admitted that the claims that they gave to the New York Times as proof of the smear campaign, like Shasty Flaw, the video about the little bump, they have no evidence for. And another claim they made was that, they had previously conspired with the New York Times to plant a piece about me in August of evidence. They admit that there is no evidence for that. And it is undisputed that Baldoni had nothing to do with any of the articles that came out about her that were negative. So I do not know that the judge is reading all of these documents, but his clerks might be. And the clerks could be telling him, she is admitting to lying. She is admitting in here that, they planted stories. She is admitting that she lied about her husband role in this. She is admitting that this is not just about her. It is about her and her husband. And then, is it really a case of sexual harassment, or is it truly as where Wayfair describes a case about a hostile? The fallout from this case is much deeper than just a simple disagreement on a movie set, because when you look at the industry standards for leading actors and producers, there is a level of professional conduct that is expected at all times. What we are seeing here is a complete breakdown of that conduct, and it raises questions about how much power celebrities should actually have over a project that involves hundreds of other workers. The fact that Wayfair and Baldoni are standing their ground suggests that they have a paper trail that could potentially prove a hostile takeover attempt, which is a very serious accusation in Hollywood circles. If the magistrate judge looks at the evidence and sees that there was a coordinated effort to undermine the director, it changes the entire narrative from one of workplace safety to one of professional sabotage. And this is why the upcoming conference on December 15th is so high stakes for everyone involved, because once they step into that room, they are no longer in control of the media spin. They're in the hands of the legal system, where facts outweigh followers and evidence outweighs influence. And we have to talk about the long-term implications for Ryan Reynolds too, because he has built a massive empire based on being the most likable guy in show business. But if the court documents continue to show that he was ghostwriting scenes and helping to push out a director, it could stain his reputation as a collaborator and business mogul. The industry is watching this very closely because it sets a precedent for how future film sets will be managed, and whether or not a lead actor can simply bring in their own team to override the vision of the person hired to lead the project. And then we have the financial aspect of this, because even though the settlement might not involve a direct exchange of cash, the loss of future earnings for Blake Lively could be in the tens of millions if studios decide she is too high risk to hire for major franchises. Again, this is the hidden cost of high conflict litigation that many people do not consider until it is too late, and they find themselves in a position where they are legally cleared but professionally toxic, and that is a very lonely place to be in an industry that relies entirely on relationships and trust. The legal strategy behind these recent admissions is fascinating to analyze from a professional perspective, because it suggests that the legal teams have finally realized that the path they were on was unsustainable, and that continuing to deny the obvious was only making the situation worse for their clients in the eyes of the court and the public. As we move closer to the settlement dates, it is becoming increasingly clear that the narrative of a simple workplace conflict has been replaced by a much more complex story of corporate maneuvers and personal ambitions clashing in a way that rarely happens so publicly in Hollywood. And the impact of this on future contracts cannot be overlooked because every lawyer in the industry is now looking at this case as a blueprint for what not to do when a lead actor and a director have a difference in creative vision. The standard clauses in production contracts are likely to become much more rigid to prevent this kind of hostile takeover from happening again, which means that in a strange way, Blake and Ryan actions might have inadvertently made it harder for other actors to have creative input in the future, because studios will be terrified of another high conflict case draining their resources and damaging their brand. And then there is the question of the actual movie and its legacy, because instead of being remembered for its message or the performances of the cast, it is now forever shadowed by the legal battle and the accusations of lying and manipulation, which is a tragic outcome for a project that was supposed to be about empowerment and truth. And when we think about the role of the magistrate judge in this, we have to understand that her priority is not to decide who is a better person or who has a better career, but to resolve a conflict that is causing a bottleneck in the federal court system. She will likely use the evidence of admitted lies as a massive hammer to break down the defenses of Blake's legal team, forcing them to realize that a trial would not be a pursuit of justice, but a public execution of their client's reputation. And as we look at the specific details of the 56.1 undisputed facts, we see that the precision of the legal language is what finally them, because you cannot argue with your own signed admissions and you cannot retract a statement once it has been entered into the record as a fact. And this level of finality is what makes the legal system so much more powerful than any social media campaign or press release. Because at the end of the day, the law does not care about your public persona. It only cares about the truth of the documents provided under the penalty of perjury. And as we wait for the conference to unfold, we are seeing a shift in the comments and the public discourse where people who were once staunch defenders of the Lively team are starting to ask difficult questions about why they were misled for so long and why the story kept changing every time a new document was filed, which shows that public trust is a fragile thing that can be lost in an instant when the reality of a situation is revealed to be the opposite of what was presented. And the irony of the situation is that by trying to control the narrative so tightly, they ended up losing control of it entirely, because the legal system has a way of stripping away the polish and the glamour to reveal the raw and often uncomfortable facts of how these people actually operate when they think no one is watching, or when they think they are above the rules that everyone else has to follow. So as this part of the script concludes, we are left with the image of two powerful forces in Hollywood finally meeting their match in the form of a federal magistrate and a set of undisputed facts that will define their careers for years to come.